As I'm sure a lot of you have noticed, there are still a ton of Kobes being worn around the NBA, WNBA, NCAA, and just local gyms around the world. The weird thing about that is we're kind of living in a golden age of basketball shoes right now. There is just limitless selection out there, and most shoes being put out right now are pretty darn good, even from lesser known brands. Plus, more players than ever now are getting their own signature shoes, which I think is great because it just increases the diversity of shoe designs out there. But go watch any televised basketball game, and what do you see? Kobes. Now these Kobes here are starting to get pretty beat up because, as I've said before, even though my passion for shoes lies in what's underneath of them, I still won't cut open a new Kobe just because I want to give that opportunity for somebody else to buy them. Plus, they are still really being sold predominantly in the resale market, although that is changing now thanks in large part to the amount of college and pro players going to such great lengths to wear them. So the question remains, why are so many pro and college players who may or even may not be endorsed by Nike forgoing newer shoes and still playing with Kobe Bryant's signature shoes? Well, there's three main reasons I've found that that's the case. Number one, Kobe Bryant's signature shoes were way ahead of their time, much like Kobe Bryant's skills on court. I mean, his skills and style of play is still trying to be copied by players of really all levels. Same can be said for his shoes. Even right now, if you look around the world of basketball and just court shoes in general, you can see Kobe Bryant's footprint on countless makes and models of shoes. Companies like Serious Player Only have staked their entire business model almost on the philosophy of Kobe shoes. The Way of Wade 808 line, you can tell, was touched by the same paintbrush of those shoes. And even Nike's new shoes, like the Sabrina one, the Book one, even the Freak 5 to a certain extent, look like they have taken a lot of inspiration from Kobe shoes and are now becoming descendants of those original line shoes. Even the Kobe line itself is being retooled and pro-trode now to try to extract as much out of the original line of shoes as possible without deviating too much from what made them so good in the first place. And if you ask around, a lot of people still prefer the original to the pro-trode because the originals were so finely tuned that it's really hard to create that whole from the sum of new parts. But specifically in the case of Kobe shoes, what I mean by ahead of their time is that when Kobe first came into the league and when he started actually getting his own shoes, the shoes he was wearing were pretty big and bulky, much like a lot of the other shoes out there at the time. But it's pretty obvious that Kobe quickly decided that he needed to zig where others were zagging and at least try to help create a shoe line that was more meant to accentuate his footwork and his game style versus other shoes at the time which were more meant to, contain his feet. And so from that point on, Kobe shoes really started pushing the limits of how lightweight materials could perform as high-level tools for NBA-level footwork, and to a certain extent, each iteration of the Kobe line would build on the lessons learned from the previous one. Case in point, the way the Kobe line a lot of times uses stiffer shank materials like carbon fiber and TPU, not in a just throw it against the wall and see what sticks method, but placing them really strategically only in places you're really going to need them for pivoting power, or only in places that the shoe needs it for reinforcement, and knowing where you would actually need to put those different materials so that you still maintain all the structural integrity of the shoe, but the shoe doesn't get weighed down by just one component. But the Kobe line didn't just push the limits of midsole and upper materials, it was also pushing the limits of rubber design to use less chunky treads and create rubber patterns that more mimic how a nimble human foot would interact with hardwood, like on the Kobe 9 where the tread is just concentric outlines of your foot's shape, basically mimicking how a bare human foot would grab a court surface if that human foot were made of rubber. It's wild. And that last point brings me to the second reason why the Kobe line is still so popular amongst most elite players, and that's because these shoes are meant for people with an absolute command of their footwork. See, in my mind, the Kobe lineup just isn't all that great for somebody with novice or just basic footwork skills. No, it's not to say that they're not good, it's just that somebody like that, like me, just really can't appreciate the tools that are underfoot. However, if your footwork is elite and the better your footwork gets, the more these shoes start to activate, almost like the secret key to a lockbox. And that's why sometimes it's really hard to explain to people why Kobe's are still the gold standard in basketball shoes. It's because to look at them from the outside and to put them on foot, if you don't know a lot about shoes, then sometimes they just don't really feel like much or look like much at all. But then again, that's kind of the point. And that's why I love the thought process behind the Kobe line, and that is the simple fact that less is more. And that's why somebody like me, or you know, more novice player who needs all the help that they can get, doesn't find the success in them as a more advanced player would. And that's why advanced players like it so much, because these shoes are tailor-made for them. It's the same story with Serena Williams' Nike Court Flare tennis shoe. They were built with the same concept in mind as the Kobe line and really took heavy inspiration from the Kobe line. And because my footwork in tennis is more up to the level of those shoes, I can use the design of them to their, you know, more full potential versus a more novice tennis player who would be, you know, tripping all over themselves. Put it this way, would you rather trust a huge midsole foam and bulky upper setup to try to help your body get in just the right position to hit a game-winning three-pointer, or Caitlin Clark's plantar foot nerve endings with a combination of the reverse Grinch outsole laid out to maximize court feel? And maybe that's why I love Aaron Gordon's signature shoes so much, because there's so much in them to protect me from myself. Not saying Aaron Gordon's shoes aren't great or that Aaron Gordon isn't a phenomenal player, which he is. It's just his shoes can be used by a much broader swath of the basketball playing audience and have tools in them that just about anybody can extract, versus a lot of Kobe's that work best when you have the skills to put your feet in just the right position and activate just the right intrinsic and extrinsic musculature. That's why to me the Kobe line found the best mixture of minimalist footwear and maximalist components to create really the perfect balance. Remember, barefoot shoes are all well and good for training and they can really teach you a lot about your own footwork, but for day-to-day use, especially on a basketball court, they do come with their whole, you know, own set of issues. Versus, you know, a super maximalist shoe, yes, they protect your foot and they do a really good job of it, but they also don't allow your foot to get to its maximum potential. Now, of course, everyone's going to be different on what they like and where they fall on that scale, but in terms of your foot's raw potential, the Kobe's to me just help realize that so much better than just about every shoe out there, although some shoes now are getting pretty darn good at that too. And the third reason that Kobe's still hold up so well is probably the most obvious reason. It's the same reason, you know, I have a pair of Andy Roddick Fig Jams behind me. You know, he's an idol to athletes, and people want to channel that motivation into their own game. By wearing a Kobe sneaker, just the thought of him and his game, you know, kind of stays top of mind to players, and in turn, it can be that extra psychological boost to play your best or just run a little bit harder or to focus just that little bit more. I mean, a prime example, what do people talk about the most when they talk about Kobe Bryant? His mentality, the Mamba mentality. That's discussed way more than were his physical capabilities. And as athletes, we all know that the mental side of your game can elevate you or completely destroy you. So then being able to look down at your shoes and see that physical representation of grit, mental toughness, and endurance just may be enough to help you get over whatever mental hill you're climbing on the court that day. So that brings me to the question, what's your favorite Kobe, right? You know, so many people have so many different, you know, attachments and loyalties to different shoes in his lineup. I'd love to know which one is your favorite. I'd love to just kind of get the overall sense of where the community's at and which one they feel like was the best in the lineup. So let me know in the comments down below. And if you do want to see which shoes I think take the most inspiration of the Kobe's and which ones I think most closely resemble the build characteristics of the original line, make sure you click into this playlist up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Thinkiverse.